Hello all.
Hello.
Today I have the honor of talking with Arian. Arian is a dear colleague. Arian, we met 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Jeddah in one of the conferences over there, if I
In
remember
beautiful city
correctly.
of Jeddah, yes, we shared a panel during one of the studies. I think it was the Future Desalination Conference in Jeddah a couple of
Yeah.
years ago.
Nikolai Vutskov was hosting
Correct.
this event, if I remember correctly. Shout out to him and thank you again, Nikolai, for inviting us. Arian, you are one of the very few people in the industry who are, despite your long career as a director and founder, you also have a practical experience with desalination and in general water treatments, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So would you like us to, can you please give a little bit of your background
Well, of
to the
course, of
viewers?
course. So I'm a chemical engineer. I did my PhD at the University of Bradford in UK. This is 21 years ago now, in 2003. And my my research at the time was in dewatering of crude oil,
Hmm.
breaking emulsions, electrostatic colysis, and that kind of thing. But when I graduated, I was on the way to do a postdoc in the UK
Okay.
and continue my postdoc. But then I made a trip to Middle East, and a cousin of mine at the time was working in a water treatment company, and I went there and I accidentally met the CEO of that company. And that company at the time was a very avant-garde company. If this is 21 years ago, they were investing in build, own, operate, and build, own, transfer desalination schemes. They were starting that. And they were making plants in my native country of Iran. They were making brackish water plants, brackish water reverse osmosis plants, working with Vivendi at the time, which is now, I think, Veolia or whatever. And then in the south of the country by the Gulf Coast and SWR, these are the biggest plants at the time. And this is
Hmm.
again 21 years ago. This was still an infant industry. And the CEO met me and said, "Look, what do you do?" I said, "This is what I do." I said, "Look, I need somebody to run my plants for me. Would you? Are you interested?" I was a 29-year-old, just fresh
Okay.
out of university, and it was a very exciting field for me because it was new and not many people wanted to go into it. My old chemical engineers usually went to petroleum industry or coating industry and that kind of thing, and desalination was something very new. And I started by taking over the operations of a brackish water reverse osmosis desalination plants for a couple of years. We did a lot of troubleshooting at the time on a scaling, on fouling mitigation. Again, very early days, and many sleepless nights. And then I then took over management of a 10,000 cubic meters a day seawater reverse osmosis plant
Mhm.
on the Gulf Coast, and and that again was a whole different ball game than brackish water because it taught me so many other things. So that's where I broke my
But
sort of
and
early
that's
days, just
that's an
really going
experience you
through
have transferred on to whatever you're doing right now, right?
many things that we're doing. Absolutely, that operation. I think I that 10 years, and then later on here in the U.S. when I moved here, I had a privilege of working with a group that was solving many of these advanced problems on very challenging water treatment and advanced membrane-based treatment issues with water planet engineering and so on and so forth. So throughout my career, for the majority of my career, I've been in the first-hand exposure of like really practical problems that these plants are facing, whether in terms of membrane fouling, membrane scaling, pre-treatment failure, pre-treatment optimization, water quality optimization. And I always had one thought that, how can we maximize the efficiency of these desalination, membrane-based desalination plants, um, and make while still making water cost effective. Um, I did a lot of work on produced water here, for example, in
Yeah.
California for irrigation, and that's a huge issue because a technology at the end of it is as good as the cost that it brings. It has to become cost effective, and when you have to put a cascade of pre-treatment units behind the reverse osmosis units, and then it becomes a 10-unit operation or 5-unit operation or a lot of chemical consumption, whatever, that solution is not a solution. It's not a sustainable solution. It could be a painkiller, but it's definitely not a cure. So all of that idea came into what I am today and the company that I found, and then whatever I've done since 2019, where I started my own entrepreneurship experience by initially forming Pacific Water Solution and then later on Active Membranes.
And now, as of late, I think you are developing something new for the market, right?
Correct.
Which has to do with affecting the operation of membranes to prevent scaling and fouling. Would you like to talk a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So at Active Membranes, company that me and my colleagues formed about a couple of years ago, we are working on a research that came out of UCLA by David Jasmy and Eric Hook, and which concentrated on making electrically conducting membranes, reverse osmosis membranes, essentially,
Okay.
to mitigate fouling and scaling. Now, why electrically conducting? Because when you electrify the membrane, then you are giving an ability to the membrane to transform a passive separation. In the olden days, you passed the water through the membrane. Membrane had no control over the water quality it saw. It fouled, it scaled. It was at the behest and at the favor of whatever pretreatment that was preceding it. Now, by making membrane electrically conducting, now you are giving the power to the membrane to modify its surface and its response to an incoming water quality, and hence it becomes inherently anti-scaling and anti-fouling. And again, this goes back, the reason I started this and I wanted to work on this project, it goes back to that experience of running plants, because, I always, ridiculously thought that, if you can talk to these membranes and it can tell you in real time what they're feeling and what they're experiencing, that would be a nice thing to have. And when I saw this research and when I interacted with the folks that invented the technology initially, I realized that this is what I've always wanted to focus on, transforming the paradigm of membrane separation and giving the membrane the power so it can provide a response, or you can provide a response so you can actively mitigate an scaling or fouling phenomena without having to resort on the efficacy of the pretreatment upstream.
Just clarify here, this is not a membrane-specific process, right?
No, it's not a new membrane. It could turn any reverse osmosis membrane into an active membrane. It's in a spiral wound form factor, which is the form factor of any membrane module out there. It can retrofit existing plant. It can work with any system, and it can work with any membrane. We are not reinventing the wheel. I don't like to reinvent things that are already invented. We're just making the existing wheels a little bit more efficient, and that's essentially the ethos of the technology.
You're bringing additional value to the table with something. You're not competing with anybody. You're having a new solution on the side that can help potentially the
membranes are
performance
efficient. Absolutely. I mean, there
of
are
water filtration.
companies out there. This is not a David and Goliath story. I don't like this fairy tale. I'm not a fairy tale person. I never liked it as a kid. I never liked it as an adult. There are practical issues with the cost of desalination. It comes from from low efficiency because we have thermodynamic limitations. Nobody can cheat thermodynamics. At the end of the day, can delay it, but you can't cheat it. You can ignore it. There's a lot of pretreatment in store, especially when you come to these waters that are very difficult to desalinate and to treat. Waters that have high scaling propensity, groundwater. Wastewater such as produced water, and this kind of waters that we increasingly need to figure out a sustainable, cost-effective way to desalinate them, and then turn them into fresh water and reuse them. So how can you change the paradigm of membrane separation? How can you redefine membrane separation from a passive process where membrane resides? It's a dumb plastic. It resides on, whatever is surrounding it to provide efficient level of operation, into something that membrane can think for itself and can provide a response. And we thought of doing that by making any membrane, electrically conducting, and by making the module a spiral bound, a standard module, 40, 40, 80, 40, whatever it comes in, also in a smart module. So when you put that as part or as a whole of a desalination, an existing or a new desalination plant, you can provide some level of power to the entire train, to the entire membrane, so it can provide, some level of inhibition on its own without having to rely on too much chemistry.
Just out of curiosity, professional curiosity, actually. Have you ever tried this process with nanofiltration membranes?
We at Active Membrane haven't, but it has been tried during the research phase of this thing back in the university with good results.
Okay.
Again, depending on, we can do it. It's been done on ultrafiltration. It's been done on nanofiltration. Again, any flat sheet, it's just a matter of providing the chemistry.
So the idea here is that the separation of the ions is not an exact science when it comes to nanofiltration. And there are a lot of parameters involved, including some electrostatic parameters, if I have understood correctly.
Right.
And I am wondering, if you insert essentially more electricity onto the membrane, how does that affect the separation of the ions? This is one thing. And the second is, can we charge, not necessarily linked to what you're doing right now, can we charge membranes in order to target specific ions for recovery?
So to the first question, what we do is two things. One is that we provide a coating that makes the membrane flat sheet electrically conducting, and then we optimize the module design, the spiral bound module design, for it to carry, because without connecting that electrically conducting material, without connecting something to an electrical source, there's no point in it. So that's the second phase of it, and that's how it does. That process doesn't impact how the membrane behaves.
Okay.
You still get the permeability, you get the separation or whatever. What we're trying to do is we're trying to apply a charge to the surface of that membrane or that feed channel, so that, and then we change that charge. So we make it alternating. So with an alternating current, what it happens is that you're constantly changing the charge of the surface from positive to negative. Now, what that does to negative and so on and so forth is that when you have charged particles within the system, it creates some sort of an electrophoretic madness in the feed channel. Things trying to go down there to go up, go down there to go up. And by that method, if you get it right, you maintain them within the water. And then hence you are avoiding scaling and nucleation on the surface of the membrane, because the scaling happens when you have this numerous, very tiny, very small nucleus of various salts that are supersaturated on the surface of the membrane. By avoiding that, we're trying to make the membrane respond to a scaling event and prevent nucleation and hence prevent the scaling. Can you make it ion specific? Depending on the chemistry of the membrane, you can. So okay. There are membranes that are being designed. I'm fortunate enough to be involved with one of those projects, nothing to do with active membrane. But there are membranes that are being designed by the virtue of the chemistry and architecture of the membrane that are becoming, ion specific. Again, we are membrane agnostic. We can make pretty much any membrane into an electrically conducting membrane. Any of those guys out there. And the spiral bond is a spiral bond. It's a form factor of the favor of the industry, and there's nothing secret about it. So essentially, yes, you can do it. Can you do that with electricity? Certainly.
I think I've heard about, I don't remember if it was UCLA or not, about production of membranes with resin particles that were targeting specific ions for recovery, like lithium, for example.
I'm involved with that project, so I can't talk about it that much, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because I signed an NDA. But yes, the membrane architecture is the next thing, right? So you have to understand. this old method of making interfacial polymerization or whatever has been around. It's efficient. It works. You tweak it to get membrane reverse osmosis standard filtration, ultrafiltration membranes of various fluxes and rejection levels and so on and so forth by optimizing that. But again, it's chemistry at the end of the day, and then it's chemical architecture, I like to call it. And making membrane is nanoscale architecture, and then if you by the virtue of that architecture, you can do a lot of things.
Sorry to continue keep spitballing here. Can we, with your process, also mitigate concentration polarization in forward osmosis membranes?
Very good, a very good question. Potentially, yes. One of the things that we think is happening is that we are changing, because we are charging the surface and we are changing the charge in the surface. One of the direct or indirect impacts of that is changing the nature of the concentration polarization layer.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And because one of the reasons that thermodynamics becomes a limitation is because of that concentration polarization layer and how it thickens up as the salinities goes up and so on. So one of the things that we like to do, and we're hoping, and we think what's happening is that by charging the surface more than usual within a small amount of electricity that we apply to our module, I think we can impact that as well.
Yeah, I had heard years before about the effort to mitigate concentration polarization with ultrasound, but I don't think it ever caught up, at least research-wise.
I mean, physically possible. I think not sure about ultrasound, but I think there are one or two companies out there doing something similar. I can't talk to their thing, but again, it's all about surface chemistry and what you do at the surface. The way we do it is that by making the surface infinitely more electrically conducting than a standard plastic, which is polyamide or whatnot. And when you do that, then you can apply a small amount of electricity to that surface. And when you do that, then now you can change the surface behavior. You can talk to the membrane can talk back to you by the virtue of the common language of electrons. And there's a lot of things that enables you to do it. And then you move into the realm of smart membranes as opposed to stuff that used to sit there and take whatever water they could take.
I think this will definitely, smart membranes will definitely revolutionize the industry. And it will be very interesting to keep in touch and see how your efforts are going.
Absolutely.
That
For
goes without
anybody
saying.
who's interested, we have ongoing pilots for the next 6 months. They're mostly here in the US, with an exception of a pilot that we plan to do at Witira, the SWIX Research Center, now Saudi Water Authority. My apologies. We're doing one over there, but they're mostly here in the US. But we encourage people to come and have a look and kick the tires on it. And whoever is interested in getting involved with these pilots, come in and see them from up front of whatever we have. We are open to open the doors and have people come and have it.
Definitely interesting to keep in touch. Another question for me is that you're definitely someone who has put a lot of blood and sweats into
and tears
innovation, trying to scale up what you have, entrenching yourself in the commercial part of the industry. So what do you think are the biggest hurdles, right, that someone has to deal with in this process?
2 or 3 things, if I want to sum them up. One is earlier stage innovations, they have a lot of problem raising funds because investors are typically interested in things that are more mature, more proven, right? Because with innovation, it may or may not work with that. There is early stage innovation. So people, it requires a certain level of they're interested, but but here in the US, for example, and I'm sure many parts of the world, there are other ways of going out and trying to raise funds and whatever. But most of those sources would require earlier stage innovations, earlier stage companies, startups to allocate some matching funds. So that becomes another hurdle. So funding money is always an issue. So funding early
Mhm.
stage research, practical research, becomes something that you either have to find somebody who shares your vision or is risky enough to take these risks and whatnot. The other issue is finding people who like to help you in that journey, folks that like to join a startup company, and people in the right mind, folks that are in the industry, professionals. Most of them do not want to do that. Why would they? Why would they risk their career, their time on a company that may not survive a year? And it's perfectly understandable. And it only takes a very special breed of people to join you on a journey of innovation. Because when you are joining a startup trying to scale up a technology, um, this is not a 9 to 5 job. It's you sleep with it, you wake up with it. You got to have that fire in your belly. If you don't have that fire in your belly every morning that you wake up, I'm going to be 15 December, and I still wake up with the same fire in my belly that I was in my 28 days. If you don't have that fire, he can, because there's a lot of pitfalls in this. And then you have to, and the other thing is, and my advice to everybody is to persevere and find solutions, be pragmatic. It's not for everybody, I understand it, but be pragmatic and persevere, stick to your plans, be ready to change them accordingly, be flexible, but always don't lose sight of that vision that got you into this in the first place. So personalities matter in this way. That's the second hurdle. No, not many people like to talk about it, but it's out there. It's psychology, it's human nature. We have to talk about it. Uh, and the third thing is essentially acceptance, right?
Okay.
You have to find people that will give you a shot, right, to your technology. And those people, most people, again, for all the right reason, they do not want to risk something that you do. And there are a lot of stuff that won't work. I mean, look at, if you go to the graveyard of all the water and tech industry, you will find many, many dead bodies and many, many graves. So
The
when
value of
people
death is
see that,
big. How it
right,
goes. Huh?
right, that graveyard is massive, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears stories in there as well. So uh, finding folks that give you a shot in the hell in the world is very important. And when you find those people, appreciate them and make sure you do everything to make them succeed. And then you succeed as well because they put their faith in you, and then you have. So nowadays, that problem is manifesting itself in incubators, in early adapters. There are
Mhm.
some big industries in the world that support innovation. Some of these companies like SWEC that are doing SWIs, they're doing this GPID or X Prize now recently come up and so on. These people get that. They realize that folks like me that have a dream, they need a lift up, and they come and they provide that lift up. They help us um, get to the next level. And I think these three are very important aspects of getting into any innovation. Even if when you start any business, that things matters: money, personality, and somebody who can help you give you a shot in hell. Fine.
You definitely need people with vision and a bit of luck to help you out. And on the latter point, and combining it a little bit with your first professional experience, do you think that we need potentially more venture capital in the water sector that will do BOO projects with innovation in order to scale them up easier? And why I'm asking this, coming from the brine, essentially part of the of water, is that even if people actually need brine treatments, they're not going to push the button because there are not enough references with the relative technologies. And I'm asking myself, if someone does a BOO project, two, three, and proves that the concept is sound, the technologies work, won't that kind of open the gates for the rest of the market to come in and fill the pipeline with these technologies?
It would definitely do, but you have to bear in mind something. So the nature of a BOT project is somebody comes in, he puts up he or she or the firm or consortium, whatever it may be, they put up the money, and their expectation is to get a return over the course of 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, your initial thought, if you're, sane person, you would say that, look, I'm going to bet in something that is already proven because that's the best bet for my money to come back. So it's contradictory by nature. You would not likely see people investing in sort of earlier stage technologies in BOT type of thing. They usually go with something that is proven. Now, the solution to that is to incorporate innovations into the mainstream of those processes. You have this process that is working. Now, a guy like me comes and says, look, by changing maybe 10% of your membrane or 5% or 10% of your membrane, or at least one of your vessels, I can provide you this advantage. Give me a shot. And then you can de-risk that process by giving those guys a shot. And if it works and you see it, then you have a solution, and you can apply that solution throughout the term of your BO or BOT, whether it be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or 20 years, or whatever, and save money, right? So I think there has to be some marriage between something that is working and that's going to be the cash machine for these investors, and their willingness to give folks like me a shot in those projects as that project matures over time.
It's a case by case scenario, I guess, with the end product. It's time, and I don't know. I think you already know about the project and the build, own, operate project in Indonesia for the production of table salt from seawater, which is a very nice brine valorization project, and it proves that the basic concept works fine. So, and I do expect that more initiatives like this should happen in order to make the rest of our lives easier as well, trying to prove that we're not elephants.
Absolutely. And the need is there, right? So because I always make this assumption, I say, look, right now, think a technology like desalination. Now, think about this. A technology like desalination is considered the technology of last resort because you only use it when you need it. You absolutely need it. Your other options are absolutely exhausted. You have no other option. This is it, right?
Yeah.
Now, imagine the world and the water scarcity issue that we're facing and the minerals scarcity issues that we're facing, especially the first one, is an existential threat. And the one technology that can address that existential threat to be considered the technology of last resort is not a good place for humanity to be
in. I wouldn't say again last resort. I wouldn't put it
in
that
most
dramatic.
cases, right?
But
if you have a stream next door, which is perfectly fine, you wouldn't go for desalination.
I will quote a little bit a conversation I have had with David Levy about this, and at least I think that the future of water is based on 3 pillars: improved water management, water reuse, and the third pylon is desalination. It doesn't matter how much new water you can create if you cannot manage it properly. Essentially, that's
absolutely true.
But desalination, I wouldn't put it really in such a, let's say, it's not that expensive compared to other solutions. And I'm gonna bring an example from my native country, Greece, from Crete. So they spent a huge amount of money to build a pharaonic dam that essentially now doesn't work due to the droughts.
Yeah.
And what brings the water is desalination, which costs, I don't know, like 1/20th of the whole project.
Yeah.
So desalination is not the worst case scenario. we have done we have a long list of much bigger mistakes in the history of water industry.
Absolutely. Perception and the fact usually there's a gap, right? So it's, especially here in a place like California, we get a lot of bad press about desalination. Not the worst ideas. It took what, 14 years for one of these desalination plants here in Southern California to get permitted. By the time it got permitted, most of the technologies were updated. A lot of the designs became extinct and so on and so forth. So perception, you're absolutely right. Perception versus, I mean, there are projects in the world that are trying to convey water miles at a time, hundreds, sometimes thousands of from one point to another. That's going to cost an arm and a leg. Compared to that, you're absolutely right. Desalination is more cost effective, but perception and conception are two different things. Now, to overcome that perception, that energy barrier of negativity and controversy and so on and so forth, you have to make the process more efficient. How can you make that process more efficient? By looking at where the pain points are. I'm focusing on one, and that's membrane separation. There are other people that are focusing on, okay, what can we get more around it? And that's brine valorization, which I think is an absolutely very important aspect of it, because it solves a major problem that is always controversial about desalination, brine disposal. Now, a waste turning into an asset is a big deal. So I think that's another aspect that we need to look at. So there are a lot of aspects of this technology that we need to focus on to make it effective, to change that perception and paradigm that this is, let's not go there unless we absolutely have to. Right?
The thing is that we haven't really made a good job of conveying the message outside of the water industry bubble.
Absolutely.
And this is something that I've tried to explain again and again to the heads of the water industry. If you don't inform the public properly, they won't understand the value of that which you bring on the table.
Absolutely. It's a PR message. You're right.
And the big question is, how can we inform the public in order for the public in turn to press the politicians to take the relative legislations and to push for desalination for water reuse?
My advice
forward.
is for people who professional in this industry, try grassroots, right? Like anything, try from the below. Last week I went to my fourth grade son's school for a couple hours, and I talked about desalination in a terms that kids would understand. Teach them where the money comes from, where the water comes from, and then how much money it costs, and so on and so forth. Grassroots education is essential, and you can't blame anybody. It's a young industry. People are trying to figure out, relatively to other industries, to dam or whatever. It's still a young industry. If you consider industry time frame. So I think there's a lot of education needed. I think folks like IDA, the water positivity, and this think tanks and so on are starting that work. But I think public education. And you don't have to, you need to have an NGO to do that. You can go and talk to your neighbors about it. You can go talk to school children about it. Any pilots that we do, I always go out and I encourage general public to come and participate in it. Come and learn about the process. It's not a fancy process. Come and learn about it.
We need to somehow, for me, there are basic things that need to be understood from the public. That water is not an infinite resource. We are running out of it.
Right.
And the price that we pay for the water that comes to our tap is not relative to what is spent for it.
Right.
And if for me, like a very easy solution for water reuse, increase the price. But this means tremendous political damage to whoever decides to do it. But if we don't pay more for the water now, we will pay 5 times more when we run out of water.
Absolutely.
And this is something that I don't know how on earth to translate, let's say, to easy to understand terms.
So we have something here in California that is mandated by states, it essentially limits the access of farmers to what they usually and historically drew from underground water resources by a significant amount, which means that a farmer that has now less access to fresh water than used to have. So there are a lot of impacts on that. The industry is going to, the agriculture is going to suffer, the price of their properties are going to suffer, and so on and so forth. So, and then, but I'm hoping that things like this, as painful as they seem, would create a perception for people that, okay, well, where do I go and find water? The additional water that I need. Well, there's that resource, but I have to spend some time and energy and effort and technology on it in order to be able. So that public perception is a function of supply and demand. And as the supply dwindles and the demand increases, then you're going to have to go and educate yourself. But you can't do it on your own. You can't expect everybody to be me and you know about everything about water and spend 20 years in it. So it's our job to go out there. And we don't need an NGO. We don't need an organization. We can start with people that we come up with. And then we deal with on a daily basis on telling them how important this water is, where does it come from, where it can come from cost effectively, and so, and change that perception from ground up. But at the same time, you also need decent technologies and responsible companies and innovations that come in and make it more cost effective, more sustainable.
I think I'll use a term I had from a previous talk. We need more adult engineering in the water space.
I would call it impact engineering. We need more engineers that think and believe that their work makes an impact. And that is the fire in the belly that I was talking about. That sense of impact. This is with my own team. That's what I try to cultivate all the time. I bring in young engineers. I don't look at the glossy pages of a resume. I just need that sparkle. I need that fire. And when I see that fire, I bring them on the rest of the skill they can pick up. You got to give them a sense of impact. You are what you're doing is the most important thing ever. So, that's the impact that you have to provide.
You can get skills, but you can't get attitudes, for sure.
There you go. You can pick up any skill, but you can't get an attitude. You're right.
Arian, thank you very much for this talk. It has been
Pleasure.
quite enlightening. We'll definitely keep in touch and see how your efforts are going.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Take care.
And hope you have a good Friday night.
I certainly will.
Okay.
Ciao, ciao, and take care.
See ya.